In the long history of ancient Egypt, some stories lie hidden in plain sight. It's a tale of power, ambition, and a legacy so challenging to the status quo that its enemies tried to wipe it from the face of the earth. Imagine a ruler who brought in an age of incredible peace and prosperity, a builder whose monuments would rival any in Egyptian history, a leader who completely redefined what it meant to be pharaoh. Now, imagine that same ruler being systematically erased from history. Their name chiseled off of stone tablets, their statues smashed into thousands of pieces, their very existence denied by their own successor. This isn't a work of fiction. This is the story of a historical cold case, a 3,000-year-old mystery buried under the sands of time. She was one of the most powerful and successful pharaohs in Egyptian history. She ruled a peaceful and prosperous kingdom, built magnificent temples, and expanded trade to exotic new lands. But after she died, her legacy was systematically destroyed. Her name was scraped off monuments, her statues were shattered, and history tried to forget that a woman had ever dared to call herself king. This is the story of Hatshepsut, the pharaoh they tried to erase, and the 3,000-year-old mystery of why. Our story starts not with a birth, but with an act of desecration. For centuries, Egyptologists exploring the grand temples of Karnak and the necropolis of Thebes kept running into a strange puzzle. On towering obelisks and sacred chapel walls, they found the ghostly outline of a phantom pharaoh. Royal cartouches, the ovals that held a king's name, were brutally scraped away, leaving blank hollows in the stone. Statues of a king in full traditional regalia, the kilt, the crowns, the false beard, were found smashed to rubble and dumped in pits, as if in a fit of rage. Who could have inspired this much fury? At first, the clues were just confusing. In some places, the Vandals had missed a spot. The surviving hieroglyphs used feminine pronouns to describe this king. It was a grammatical puzzle that just didn't make sense, a contradiction that defied everything known about ancient Egypt. A king who was a she. For early scholars, the idea seemed absurd. They came up with theories, suggesting it was just a chaotic period of history best forgotten. But as more evidence was dug up, especially from the breathtaking temple at Deir el-Bahri, a name finally came out of the shadows: Hatshepsut. The name belonged to a woman, and the evidence was undeniable. She hadn't been a mere queen, she had been a king. And someone, decades after her death, had put in a massive effort to make the world forget her. The question that has consumed historians for over a century isn't just who she was, but why? Why try to erase a pharaoh who, by all accounts, ruled over a golden age? To answer that, we have to go back to the beginning, to the birth of a princess destined to break every tradition. Hatshepsut was born around 1507 BC, right at the very top of Egyptian society. She was the daughter of Pharaoh Thutmose I, a great military leader, and his principal wife, the great royal wife Thutmose. Her lineage was perfect. In a society where the royal female line carried enormous weight, Hatshepsut's blood was the purest of the pure. She was a direct descendant of the pharaohs and queens who had founded the celebrated 18th dynasty, the dynasty that kicked off the New Kingdom, Egypt's era of greatest wealth and power. From a young age, she was groomed for a life of influence. She would have gotten the best education in arts, literature, and politics. But her most important role was religious. Hatshepsut was made God's wife of Ammonius. This wasn't some honorary title. It was one of the most powerful positions a woman could hold in Egypt. The God's wife of Ammonius was the human partner to the king of the gods, Ammonius Ra. She played a key role in religious rituals that were believed to keep the cosmos in balance and ensure the nation's prosperity. This role gave her huge wealth, political clout, and a sacred authority that was second only to the pharaoh himself. To keep the bloodline pure and consolidate power, it was royal tradition for Hatshepsut to marry her half-brother, Thutmose II, probably when she was just a teenager. He was the son of Thutmose I and a secondary wife, which actually made Hatshepsut his superior in royal lineage. Through this marriage, she became the great royal wife, the Queen of Egypt. They had one daughter, Neferrer, but their reign together was cut short. Thutmose II was a frail ruler and died after only a few years on the throne. His death threw Egypt into a moment of uncertainty. The heir was a young boy, also named Thutmose, born to one of the pharaoh's lesser wives. This child, Thutmose III was the rightful king, but he was just an infant and far too young to rule. Egypt needed a steady hand. Traditionally, the queen mother would step in as a regent, ruling in the young king's name until he came of age. And so, Hatshepsut, the dowager queen and God's wife of Ammonius, took on the role she was born for. She became the regent of Egypt, the power behind the throne. For a while, everything went as planned. But Hatshepsut wasn't a woman who was content to just keep the throne warm. For the first few years of her regency, Hatshepsut played by the rules. She managed the state, ran the government, and ruled on behalf of her young stepson, Thutmose III. Statues from this time show her as a queen, in feminine clothes, standing behind the small figure of the boy king. But behind the scenes, she was making moves. Hatshepsut was gathering her supporters, building alliances with key officials, military leaders, and, most importantly, the powerful priesthood of Ammonius, whose favor she already had. Then, around the 7th year of her rule, something completely unprecedented happened. Hatshepsut made a choice that would change Egyptian history forever. She was done being a regent, a temporary placeholder. She decided to become a king. This wasn't a violent takeover. It was a carefully planned political transformation. She adopted the full 5-fold titulary of a pharaoh, the sacred names and titles that only male rulers could hold. She started being shown in a radical new way. Images of the queen were replaced with images of a king. She was depicted with a male body, wearing the royal kilt, the traditional headdress, and even the false beard, a key symbol of pharaonic power. This wasn't her rejecting her identity as a woman. It was a genius political move. To rule in a deeply patriarchal society, she had to use the accepted language of power. The visual language of kingship was male, so she adopted it. She was now no longer just a regent for Thutmose III. She was his co-ruler, and she made it very clear that she was the senior king. So how did she pull it off? How did a woman convince an entire nation to accept her as a divine, male pharaoh? She did it with one of the most masterful PR campaigns the ancient world has ever seen. Hatshepsut knew her claim to the throne was unusual and could be challenged. Being a female king broke with thousands of years of tradition, disrupting Ma'at, the sacred idea of cosmic order and balance. She had to prove that her rule wasn't just her own ambition, but the will of the gods themselves. To do this, she turned her biggest weakness, her gender, into her greatest strength, and she used religion as her tool. Her masterstroke was her divine birth story, which she had carved for everyone to see on the walls of her magnificent mortuary temple. The carvings tell an amazing story. They show the great god Ammonius himself announcing to the other gods that he wants to create a divine ruler for Egypt. He then takes the form of her father, Thutmose I, and visits her mother, Queen Ahmose. In a scene of huge religious significance, he holds the ankh, the symbol of life, to the queen's nose, and she conceives a divine child. The message was unmistakable. Hatshepsut was no mere mortal. She was the biological daughter of the king of the gods. Her rule wasn't a political power grab, it was her destiny. This propaganda was everywhere. She secured her power by winning the loyalty of Egypt's most powerful men. One man stands out, Senenmut. Though he came from humble beginnings, Senenmut rose to become one of the most powerful officials in Egypt under Hatshepsut, holding titles like Chief Steward of Ammonius and Overseer of all royal works. He was also the tutor to her daughter. His relationship with Hatshepsut was clearly very close, so close that it's fueled centuries of speculation that they were lovers, though there's no concrete proof. What we know for sure is that with loyal officials like Senenmut running the country, Hatshepsut was free to reign as a true pharaoh, and her reign would become one of Egypt's most glorious. Unlike many pharaohs before and after her, Hatshepsut's reign wasn't defined by war. While she did lead at least one successful military campaign in Nubia early on, her focus was clearly on building, enriching, and restoring Egypt. She launched massive building projects across the kingdom, repairing old temples and commissioning new, grander structures than Egypt had ever seen. Her crown jewel, the masterpiece she's still remembered for, is her mortuary temple at Deir el-Bahri. She called it Djeser Djeseru, the Holy of Holies. Designed by her trusted official Senenmut, the temple is an architectural marvel. It doesn't just sit on the landscape, it merges with it. Three vast terraces with colonnades are built directly into the towering limestone cliffs, linked by sweeping ramps that would have been lined with gardens and sphinxes. It looks like no other temple in Egypt, a stunning display of power that seems almost modern in its design. But Hatshepsut's legacy wasn't just carved in stone, it was built on trade. Her most famous achievement was a daring trade mission to the distant and semi-mythical land of Punt. The exact location of Punt is still debated, but it was likely somewhere on the Horn of Africa. The Egyptians called it God's land, a source of precious and exotic goods. The carvings at her temple show this incredible journey in vivid detail. You can see 5 massive Egyptian ships, each with sails and 30 rowers, arriving in a foreign land. They even show the homes of the Puntites and their rulers. The expedition was a huge success. The ships came back loaded with the riches of Punt, gold, ivory, ebony, and exotic animals. But most importantly, they brought back huge amounts of myrrh and frankincense, fragrant resins that were vital for Egyptian temple rituals. They even brought back live myrrh trees, which they successfully planted in Egyptian soil, a botanical achievement she celebrated on her temple walls. For over 2 decades, she ruled over a stable, wealthy, and prosperous Egypt, becoming one of the most successful pharaohs of the New Kingdom. After a reign of about 22 years, the great female pharaoh died around 1458 BCE. We don't know the exact cause of her death, but modern scans of her mummy suggest she was a woman in her 50s who may have had bone cancer and diabetes. After she died, her stepson, Thutmose III, finally took the throne as the sole ruler of Egypt. He was now a grown man, an expert in military strategy, and ready to lead. For the first 2 decades of his reign, nothing happened. Hatshepsut's monuments were left untouched. Her images stayed on temple walls. Her name was respected. The transfer of power seemed to be perfectly smooth. Thutmose III immediately launched a series of brilliant military campaigns, turning Egypt into a true empire and earning the nickname the Napoleon of ancient Egypt. And he did it all from the foundation of a stable and wealthy nation that Hatshepsut had built and handed to him. This long period of silence makes what happened next so shocking and mysterious. Long after Hatshepsut was dead and buried, sometime late in Thutmose III's reign, the order was given. It was time to erase her. This wasn't a random act of destruction. It was a systematic, state-sponsored campaign to wipe her from history. Workers were sent all over Egypt with one chillingly specific mission: remove every trace of the female king. Her name was meticulously chiseled out of temple walls and obelisks. Sometimes, it was replaced with the names of her father or her husband, creating a false history where she never ruled alone. Thousands of her statues were torn down, smashed, and ceremonially buried in a pit near her temple. This was an attempt to retroactively kill her, to deny her an afterlife by destroying her name and image. So why do it? And why wait almost 20 years? For decades, the leading theory was simple: revenge. Historians pictured Thutmose III as a bitter man who grew up in his stepmother's shadow and finally took his vengeance. But that 20-year gap makes a personal grudge seem unlikely. Modern scholars now think the reasons were far more political and complex. One popular theory is that it was all about securing the line of succession. Late in his reign, Thutmose III needed to make sure his own son, Amenhotep II, would inherit the throne without any problems. By erasing the precedent of a powerful woman from a superior bloodline taking the throne, Thutmose III could remove a potential justification for a future rival to challenge his son. It was about cleaning up the official record. Another theory points to a conservative backlash. Hatshepsut's rule was a radical break from tradition. The idea of a female pharaoh may have been deeply disturbing to the conservative establishment. A female king disrupted the cosmic order, or Ma'at. So, the erasure may have been an attempt to restore that order, to put things back in their proper, traditional, male-dominated place. It wasn't about hating Hatshepsut, it was about hating the idea of her. Whatever the reason, the campaign was brutally effective. For thousands of years, the story of the great female pharaoh was lost. For nearly 3,500 years, the plan worked. Hatshepsut's name disappeared from the official king lists. Later pharaohs took credit for her buildings. History forgot her. She became a ghost, a puzzle of weird pronouns and vandalized monuments. But her enemies weren't perfect. They missed inscriptions high up on her obelisks. They failed to find every single statue. And they couldn't destroy her masterpiece, the temple at Deir el-Bahri. The rediscovery began in the 19th century when scholars started to piece together the strange inscriptions. The full excavation of her temple revealed the glorious story of her reign, carved right into the stone. But one mystery was left. Where was the queen herself? Her tomb, found by Howard Carter in 1903, was empty. For over a century, the location of her mummy was one of the great unsolved mysteries of Egyptology. The trail eventually led to a small, unimportant tomb known as KV-60. Inside, two mummies had been found. One was her wet nurse, and the other was an unidentified woman left lying on the floor. For decades, she lay there, anonymous. Then, in 2007, a team led by the famous Egyptologist Dr. Zahi Hawass decided to solve the case. They used modern CT scanners on unidentified female mummies from that era. The scan of the KV-60 mummy showed she was a woman of about 50 who died from what looked like bone cancer. But the final, definitive clue, the smoking gun in this ancient cold case, came from a small wooden box found years earlier. The box was inscribed with Hatshepsut's name and was thought to hold her mummified organs. The CT scan of the box revealed something incredible: a single, broken molar tooth. Dr. Hawass and his team scanned the jaw of the mummy from KV-60. They found a missing molar in her upper jaw. The root left in the jawbone was a perfect match for the tooth in the box. The dimensions were exact. It was a 1 in a million forensic match. After 3,500 years in hiding, the lost queen had finally been found. The story of Hatshepsut is a powerful reminder that you can't keep a great legacy down. They tried to smash her statues, but archaeologists pieced them back together. They tried to chisel away her name, but linguists read the faint traces they left behind. They tried to hide her body, but science found her. She wasn't a usurper. She was a legitimate ruler with the purest royal blood, a sharp politician who used propaganda to secure her throne, and a pharaoh who led Egypt through a golden age of peace, prosperity, and art. Her story was so powerful, her example so threatening, that her successor felt the only way to control the future was to rewrite the past. But history, in the end, can't be erased. It can only be buried. And sometimes, it just waits patiently, ready to be rediscovered. What do you think was the real reason Thutmose III tried to erase her? Was it a cold, political calculation, or a personal vendetta? Let us know your theory in the comments below. And if you want to solve more mysteries from the ancient world, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss what's next. Thanks for watching.